Hi, very glad to see you on the channel. Before you start listening to the story, write in the comments whether you like the voice on the video. I sat at the kitchen table, absent-mindedly stirring a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. The soft hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the house, but my thoughts were loud. Jessica was in the other room, talking on the phone, her voice carrying through the thin walls. I didn't know who she was talking to, but I knew the tone. Dismissive, irritated. The way she spoke when she was talking about me. I try not to listen, but certain words hit like gut punches. Oh, please, Daniel. He barely works, just sits around all day pretending he's exhausted from being home with the kids. I swear, if I have to hear him complain about how hard his life is one more time, a pause, a laugh, then quieter. If it weren't for me, he'd be completely useless. While you're here, leave a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I'd love to know. I stared into the swirling remnants of my coffee, trying to swallow the familiar lump in my throat. It wasn't the first time she had said something like that. Probably wouldn't be the last. It wasn't that I didn't work. I did. I worked damn hard, taking care of the house, making sure everything was in order, handling all the things she didn't have time for between her endless open houses and late-night staging appointments. But according to Jessica, that wasn't real work. Not like hers. Not like selling million-dollar homes to desperate couples, flashing her perfect smile and making them believe she cared. I wasn't always like this. I used to be confident, used to take pride in myself. But years of little jabs, rolled eyes, and outright humiliation had chipped away at whatever self-worth I had left. It started small, almost unnoticeable. A comment about how I wasn't ambitious enough. A joke about how I had let myself go since the kids were born. But then it got worse. I became the punchline to every joke, the weak husband who couldn't keep up with his powerful wife. The worst was when she did it in public. I knew I should have said something a long time ago, but every time I worked up the nerve, she'd twist it around. "Oh, stop being so sensitive," she'd say, shaking her head in exasperation. "It's just a joke. Everyone knows I love you." And maybe for a while I believed that this was just how marriage worked, that maybe I was too sensitive, that I should just be grateful she was still here, still coming home to me, even if she made me feel like an afterthought. Tonight, we were at her sister's house for a family dinner. The whole group was there, Jessica's parents, her sister and her husband, their kids, even a few close family friends. I stayed in the background, sipping my drink, trying to keep out of the way. Jessica, as always, was the center of attention, dazzling them with stories about work, about her latest big sale, about the glamorous world she was a part of. It wasn't long before she turned her attention to me. "Oh, you should have seen Daniel the other day," she said, smirking. "He tried to fix the sink and ended up flooding the whole kitchen. You'd think after being home all day, he'd be at least a little handy, but nope. Absolutely hopeless." Laughter erupted around the table. I forced a tight smile, my face burning. It wasn't true. The pipe had been old and rusted. I had called the plumber the second it burst. But that didn't matter. What mattered was that she had framed it as another example of my incompetence. Another story to add to the collection. Her sister shook her head, laughing. "Jessica, you're terrible." Jessica grinned. I know. But come on, if I don't tease him, who will? He's just so." She waved a hand in the air, searching for the right word. "Soft." My stomach twisted. Soft. That one hurt. More than it should have. More than any of the other comments she had made over the years. Because it wasn't just a joke. It was how she saw me. Weak. Pathetic. A man who wasn't enough. I put my drink down and clear my throat. Jess, I might not be the one selling houses, but at least I don't treat my own family like a marketing strategy. The words came out before I could stop them. And for the first time in years, Jessica's smile faltered. Silence settled over the table. Her eyes narrowed. "Excuse me." I could feel everyone's eyes on me, waiting to see what would happen. My heart pounded in my chest, but I refused to back down. I had spent years biting my tongue, letting her walk all over me, convincing myself that it was easier to stay quiet. But right now, looking at her, I realized something. I wasn't afraid of her anymore. I was tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of playing the role she had written for me. I continued, my voice steady, That maybe if you spent half as much time appreciating what you have instead of tearing it down, you wouldn't have to work so hard convincing everyone how perfect your life is. A stunned silence filled the room. Jessica's face went pale, then red. She opened her mouth, then closed it. For once, she didn't have a clever comeback. Her father cleared his throat, awkwardly shifting in his seat. Her sister looked down at her plate. Even her friends avoided eye contact. They all knew. They always knew. But no one had ever called her out before. Jessica's jaw clenched. "We'll talk about this later." I nodded. "Yeah, we will." But in that moment, I already knew. There wouldn't be a later. Not in the way she meant. Because something had shifted. A door had opened, and for the first time I saw the way out. The night after the family dinner, Jessica barely spoke to me. She moved through the house with tight shoulders, her jaw clenched, her silence heavier than any screaming match we'd ever had. I knew she was stewing, waiting for the right moment to let loose. She didn't like being challenged, especially not in front of an audience. She had spent years shaping the narrative, making me the joke, the man who should be grateful for her presence. And last night, I had flipped the script. I stayed up late, sitting on the couch in the dim glow of the television, but I wasn't watching. I was waiting. Eventually, she would come out, and we'd have the argument she had been holding in since dinner. But she never did. Instead, I heard the soft creak of the bedroom door and the quiet click of it locking behind her. That was her message. If I wasn't going to play along, she wasn't going to pretend anymore. By morning, she had returned to her usual self, polished, composed, acting as if nothing had happened. She moved through the kitchen in her silk blouse and pencil skirt, sipping coffee while scrolling through her phone. When I walked in, she barely glanced at me. "I'm taking an extra shift today," she said coolly. "One of my clients wants a late showing." She said it like an announcement, not an invitation for discussion. But I knew better than to let that slide. Another late showing? I leaned against the counter, studying her. "You've had a lot of those lately." She finally looked up, her eyes sharp. "That's what happens when you work in real estate, Daniel. You wouldn't understand." There was again the reminder that I was beneath her, that my role as a stay-at-home dad wasn't real work, that taking care of the house, the kids, and everything she ignored wasn't enough. I exhaled slowly. "I understand plenty." Her lips pressed into a thin line, but before she could say anything, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, then turned away from me as she answered. "Hey, I was just about to call you," she said, her voice shifting, becoming lighter, almost playful. "Yeah, tonight works perfectly. I'll text you the details." I watched her, my stomach twisting. When she hung up, she smoothed her skirt and picked up her purse. "Don't wait up," she said, brushing past me. I stood there long after the door closed behind her. I should have confronted her right then. Should have demanded an answer. But something inside me told me not to. Not yet. Later that night, after the kids were in bed, I sat at the dining table, staring at the untouched plate of food I had made for Jessica. The clock ticked past 11, then 12, then 1. Finally, I heard the sound of her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. She walked in like she hadn't been gone for hours, tossing her purse onto the counter. "Long night?" I asked, my voice calm. She barely spared me a glance. "Exhausting." I nodded slowly. "You smell like cologne." That got her attention. She froze for half a second, then turned to face me fully, her expression perfectly composed. One of my clients was wearing way too much. It clung to me. I studied her, searching for any crack in her armor. But she had always been good at this, lying without hesitation, acting like I was the one being unreasonable. "I tried calling you," I said. She shrugged. "I was busy." The tension between us thickened, a silent battle neither of us wanted to start outright. I wanted to say more, to push, to demand she tell me what I already knew. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I simply nodded. "Right? Busy." She exhaled sharply, clearly annoyed, but she didn't press further. Instead, she walked past me toward the bedroom. "I have another showing tomorrow," she called over her shoulder. "Don't make a big deal about it." I sat there long after she disappeared down the hall. The next day, we were invited to a friend's barbecue. It was the kind of event Jessica loved, an opportunity to be surrounded by people, to laugh, to be the center of attention. And she played her role perfectly, flashing that dazzling smile, weaving through conversations with ease. I kept my distance, staying near the grill with a few of the guys, nodding along to their stories. But I could hear her. "I swear, Daniel is just so sensitive lately," she said, shaking her head with mock exasperation. "He actually got upset because I had to work late. Can you believe that?" A few people chuckled. "Maybe he just misses you," one of the women offered. Jessica rolled her eyes. "Please, it's not like he does much while I'm gone." The laughter was louder this time, and my jaw clenched. I turned away, gripping the edge of the counter, forcing myself to breathe. This wasn't new. This was just another scene in the long-running play of our marriage. I was the joke, the man who stayed home while his wife conquered the world, and everyone around us accepted it as fact. I don't know what did it. Maybe it was the way she laughed, so dismissive, so sure of herself. Maybe it was the way no one defended me. Maybe it was just the weight of years of this, piling on top of me until I couldn't take it anymore. But something in me snapped. I turned, my voice cutting through the laughter. "You know, Jessica, it's funny how much time you spend talking about how useless I am," I said, my tone light, but edged with steel. "Especially considering I'm the one holding everything together while you're out working late." The laughter died instantly. Jessica's eyes widened slightly, caught off guard, but she recovered quickly. "Daniel, don't be ridiculous." I stepped closer, lowering my voice just enough that only she could hear. "Is that what you tell him? That I'm ridiculous? That I don't do enough? That I don't deserve better than this?" For the first time in a long time, she looked shaken. I exhaled, shaking my head. "You can keep playing your little game, Jessica. Keep telling yourself I won't figure it out. But we both know the truth, don't we?" She swallowed hard, her fingers tightening around her drink. For the rest of the night, she barely spoke. But I had made my decision. The next time she went to one of her late-night showings, I was going to follow her, and I was going to find out exactly what she was hiding. Jessica left the next evening just as she always did, perfectly put together, her makeup flawless, her perfume light but noticeable. She gave me the same tired excuse, another late-night staging, another desperate client who just had to see a house after dark. She always said it like I was too simple to understand, like she was the only one in the world who could possibly have a demanding schedule. "Don't wait up," she said over her shoulder as she grabbed her purse. I didn't respond. I just watched her go. This time, I didn't sit on the couch, staring at the door and waiting for her to come back with the smell of someone else on her. This time, I had a plan. The moment I heard her car pull out of the driveway, I grabbed my keys and followed. I stayed 3 cars back, keeping a careful distance as she wound through the city. She didn't go to the office. She didn't go to a property. She drove straight to an upscale hotel downtown, the kind with a valet who took her car with a polite nod. I gripped the wheel, my pulse hammering as I watched her disappear inside like it was nothing. For a long moment, I just sat there. A part of me had hoped, stupidly, desperately, that I was wrong, that maybe I was paranoid, that I was the one making this into something it wasn't. But there was no explaining this away. Jessica wasn't showing a house. She wasn't meeting a client. She was checking into a hotel in the middle of the night like a woman with something to hide. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. I could have gone in right then, stormed through the lobby, demanded to know who she was meeting, made a scene loud enough for the entire city to hear. But I didn't. That wasn't how I wanted this to go. I needed proof. The next day, after Jessica left for work, I went through her things. Not like a frantic husband in a rage, not tearing through drawers and throwing clothes aside. No, I was careful, calculated. I'd spent too many years letting her manipulate me, talk circles around me, make me feel like I was the problem. This time, I was going to make sure she couldn't twist the truth. I started in her closet, running my fingers along her neatly hung blouses, her carefully organized shoes. Then I saw it, tucked behind a row of designer handbags, a small box, the kind that looked expensive before you even opened it. I pulled it down slowly, my stomach already sinking. Inside was a sleek silver watch, pristine, untouched, with a small engraved message on the back. "For every moment we steal." I stared at the words, my hands shaking. Every moment we steal. Not a generic engraving. Not something a client would give her. No, this was personal. This was something meant for someone she cared about, someone she was sneaking around with. I swallowed hard, forcing down the burn in my throat. How long? How many nights had she come home, slipping into our bed after being with him, laughing at me behind my back? How many times had she looked me in the eye and lied without a second thought? I sat there for a long time, turning the watch over in my hands, feeling the weight of it like it was pressing against my chest. Then, slowly, deliberately, I took the watch out of the box and set it aside. In its place, I left something else, a cheap plastic watch from the dollar store, the kind that looked so absurdly out of place in that expensive velvet-lined box that she would know. She would know I had found it. That night, when she came home, she was different. She moved through the house slower, her eyes flicking toward me, watching, waiting. She was trying to read me, trying to figure out if something had changed. I didn't give her anything. I acted normal. Set the table. Put the kids to bed. Pretended like I didn't know that she was unraveling inside. Finally, after dinner, she disappeared into the bedroom. I waited, counting the seconds, picturing her opening the closet, pulling down the box, flipping it open. Then silence. It stretched on for what felt like forever, and when she finally emerged, her face was carefully blank. "Did you move some things around today?" she asked, her voice light, casual, but her fingers were clenched tight around the edge of the kitchen counter. I turned, tilted my head like I didn't know what she meant. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. "Nothing," she finally said. "Just thought something was missing." I held her gaze. "Maybe you just misplaced it." She swallowed, forcing a smile. "Yeah, maybe." That night, Jessica didn't sleep well. I could feel her shifting beside me, her breathing uneven, her mind racing. She knew I knew, and that was exactly what I wanted. The next morning, she left the house in a hurry, grabbing her keys and practically sprinting to her car. I followed her at a distance, knowing exactly where she was going. She didn't go to work. She didn't go to a house showing. She went straight back to the hotel. I watched from across the street, my heart pounding as she stepped inside. This was it, the final piece, the undeniable proof. I took out my phone, took a picture, and smiled to myself. She had no idea what was coming next. I sat in my car across the street from the hotel, my grip tight on the steering wheel. Jessica had walked in without hesitation, her heels clicking against the marble floor, her posture confident. She had done this before, many times. That much was clear. My jaw clenched as I watched the doorman greet her with familiarity, nodding as she passed like she was a regular. She disappeared into the elevator, and I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to stay in control. I needed proof, but more than that, I needed a plan. It wasn't enough to know. It wasn't enough to sit in my car, burning with betrayal, while she threw away our marriage behind closed doors. No, I wanted her to feel this, to see her perfect little world crumble the way she had made mine collapse, piece by piece. I grabbed my phone, my fingers moving swiftly as I searched through my contacts. I found a real estate listing, one I had seen before, a house I knew she was showing in just 2 days. A massive property, one of those homes that looked like something straight out of a magazine. She had bragged about it at dinner last week, talking about the commission she'd make, how it would put her at the top of her firm's leaderboard. That was going to be my stage. I made the call, disguising my voice just enough to sound like any other high-end client. I gave a fake name, said I was interested in a private tour. Jessica, of course, was more than happy to oblige. She scheduled the appointment without hesitation, promising exclusivity, discretion. If only she knew. The next 48 hours were agonizing, but I kept my cool. I didn't mention the hotel. I didn't let on that I knew about the watch, about the lies, about all of it. Instead, I played my part. I was the quiet husband, the same one she had spent years making into a joke. Let her think she still had control. The day of the showing, I left the house early, telling her I had errands to run. She barely acknowledged it, too busy perfecting her appearance, making sure she looked flawless. I arrived at the property first, parking down the street, waiting. When she pulled up, she stepped out of her car with a smile, phone in hand, already texting. Probably him. I let her unlock the door, walk inside, take a few steps toward the grand living room before I made my presence known. Beautiful place, isn't it? I said casually, stepping into view. Jessica froze. Her eyes widened, and for the first time in a long time, I saw something I never thought I'd see on her face. Fear. Daniel. Her voice was tight, controlled, but I could see the panic creeping in. I walked further inside, looking around like I was actually considering buying the place. This house really does have everything. Privacy, luxury, a master bedroom perfect for late-night meetings. My eyes locked onto hers. Or other things. She swallowed hard. What are you doing here? I smiled. That's funny. I was just about to ask you the same thing. Her phone buzzed in her hand, and she nearly jumped. I didn't have to see the screen to know who it was. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Go ahead. Answer it. Her fingers gripped the device tighter. I don't know what you're talking about. I chuckled. Sure you don't. She was unraveling, her perfectly curated world slipping through her fingers. But I wasn't done. Not yet. I pulled out my own phone, tapping the screen a few times before holding it up. She paled. Recognize this place? I asked, flipping through photos. Shots of her walking into the hotel, of her at dinner with a man I didn't recognize, of them getting into the elevator together. I had followed her for days, gathering everything I needed. And now, she had no way out. Her breath hitched. Daniel, please. I cut her off. Don't. You don't get to plead now. You don't get to manipulate your way out of this like you always do. She blinked rapidly, panic settling in her eyes. It's not what it looks like. I laughed. A sharp, bitter sound. Really? Then tell me, Jessica, what exactly does it look like? She opened her mouth, then closed it. She had nothing. No excuses, no rehearsed lines. Just silence. I took a step back, inhaling deeply, letting the moment stretch between us. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to smile for the cameras, finish this showing like the professional liar you are. And when you get home, you're going to find your bags packed. Her lips parted, her breath shallow. Daniel, I'm done, Jessica. My voice was calm, steady, strong. And so are you. She trembled, her mask slipping completely for the first time. But I didn't care. Not anymore. I turned, walking out the front door, leaving her standing in the house she had hoped to sell, trapped in the ruins of the life she had destroyed. I didn't go straight home after leaving Jessica at the house. I needed time to let it all settle, to make sure I didn't let the anger cloud my next move. I drove around for a while, my fingers gripping the steering wheel too tightly, my mind replaying every lie, every smirk, every insult she had ever thrown my way. She had spent years making me feel small, turning me into a joke while she lived another life right under my nose. But now, the joke was on her. By the time I walked into the house, the kids were already asleep. The silence felt heavier than usual, but maybe that was just me. Maybe that was because I knew that after tonight, everything was going to change. I went straight to the bedroom, pulling out a suitcase and throwing it onto the bed. I packed her things methodically. No rage, no recklessness, just cold efficiency. Clothes, shoes, makeup, everything she needed to leave and never come back. When I reached for her jewelry box, my eyes landed on the small velvet case she had hidden in the closet. The fake watch was still inside, right where I had left it. I smirked. She had known then, had known I was onto her. And still, she had gone to meet him. That was the kind of arrogance that only came from years of thinking I was too weak to do anything about it. The front door swung open just as I zipped up the suitcase. Daniel. Jessica's voice was raw, desperate, a far cry from the confident, dismissive tone she always used with me. She stepped inside cautiously, her eyes darting to the suitcase on the bed. You're really doing this? I turned to face her, leaning casually against the dresser. I thought I made myself clear. She inhaled sharply, blinking fast like she was trying to hold back tears. We need to talk about this. I folded my arms, my expression unmoving. Talk? You mean like the way you talked to your lover while you were sneaking around behind my back? Or maybe the way you talked about me to your friends, making me out to be some pathetic fool? Her lips parted, but I could see it now, the wheels turning in her head, trying to find the right angle, the right lie. But I wasn't giving her the chance. I've spent years being your punching bag. I continued, my voice steady. I let you humiliate me, insult me, tear me down in front of anyone who'd listen. And I took it because I thought maybe, just maybe, you still cared. That maybe this was just who you were, and I was the one being too sensitive. She swallowed, stepping closer. Daniel, but it wasn't that, was it? I cut her off, my jaw tightening. It was never about me being sensitive. It was about you justifying what you were doing behind my back, making me out to be worthless so you wouldn't have to feel guilty. Her breath hitched, and for the first time, she had no immediate response. No quick excuse. No kutindimark. Just silence. I grabbed the suitcase and wheeled it toward her. You don't get to rewrite this, Jessica. You don't get to spin the story so that you're the victim. You did this. You made these choices. Tears welled in her eyes, but they didn't move me. I had spent too long drowning in my own pain to care about hers now. Where am I supposed to go? She whispered. I shrugged. Not my problem. She let out a shaky breath, her hands gripping the edge of the suitcase like she was trying to ground herself. What about the kids? I exhaled through my nose, shaking my head. You think I'd take them away from their mother? No. They deserve better than this mess you created. We'll figure out custody, but right now, you need to go. Her face crumpled, but I didn't budge. I never meant to hurt you, she said, her voice breaking. I let out a hollow laugh. Yeah? Well, you did. And now you get to live with that. For a long moment, she just stood there, staring at me like she was trying to find something in my expression, some sign that I would cave, that I'd let her manipulate me one last time. But I didn't. Finally, she grabbed the suitcase and turned toward the door. I didn't watch her leave. Didn't wait to see if she would turn back with one last plea. I just stood there, listening as the front door clicked shut. And for the first time in years, the house felt lighter. The silence after Jessica left was deafening. The house, once filled with her presence, her perfume lingering in the air, the sound of her heels against the hardwood floor, the sharp tone of her voice cutting through conversations, felt different. Lighter, emptier, better. I stood in the middle of the living room, staring at the door she had just walked out of, suitcase in hand. A part of me expected her to come back, to burst through the door with one last desperate attempt to manipulate me. But she didn't, and she wouldn't, because this time I was done. I exhaled slowly, running a hand through my hair before turning toward the kitchen. The dishes from dinner were still in the sink, the remnants of a meal I had barely touched. I forced myself to clean up, to do something other than stand there drowning in my own thoughts. I scrubbed the plates harder than necessary, the soapy water scalding against my skin, but I didn't care. It felt good, productive, like I was washing away the years of humiliation along with the grime. The sound of small footsteps behind me made me pause. I turned to see our daughter, barely awake, rubbing her tired eyes as she shuffled into the kitchen. Daddy. Her voice was small, unsure. Where's Mommy? I dried my hands on a towel, crouching down to her level. Mommy's going to be staying somewhere else for a little while. Her little brows furrowed. Did she go on a trip? I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. Something like that. She blinked up at me, processing before nodding. Okay. Then, after a pause, are you okay? The question nearly knocked the wind out of me. How many nights had I stayed up, wondering if Jessica ever thought to ask me the same thing, if she ever noticed when I was hurting? But here was my little girl, barely awake, more concerned about me than Jessica had been in years. I smiled softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Yes, sweetheart, I'm okay. She nodded again, satisfied with my answer, before wrapping her arms around my neck. I held her tight, inhaling the familiar scent of her strawberry-scented shampoo, letting the warmth of her small body remind me that I hadn't lost everything. That night, I barely slept. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind running over everything. The betrayal, the lies, the years of feeling like I wasn't enough. And then, the way she had looked at me when I told her to leave, like she had never expected me to be strong enough to do it. Morning came too soon, and with it, the storm I had been waiting for. Jessica called 7 times before noon. I ignored every single one. Then the messages came. We need to talk. This isn't fair to me. You can't just shut me out like this. I smirked at that one. Fair to her? She had no idea what fairness was. By the afternoon, She had stopped pretending to be the victim. "You're overreacting. People make mistakes. I didn't love him, Daniel. It was just something I needed. You're ruining our family over one bad decision." I clenched my jaw, my fingers hovering over the screen, tempted to reply. But I didn't. I refused to give her the satisfaction of thinking she could still manipulate me. Instead, I blocked her number. An hour later, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was from an unknown number. I sighed, already knowing who it was before I even answered. "Jessica." A beat of silence, then a sharp exhale. "You blocked me?" I leaned against the counter, rubbing my temple. "What do you want?" Her voice was controlled, but I could hear the cracks beneath it. "We need to figure things out, Daniel. This isn't just about us. What about the kids?" My grip on the phone tightened. "You don't get to play the good mother card now. Where was this concern when you were sneaking off to hotels?" She let out a frustrated breath. "It wasn't like that." I laughed to sound bitter. "I have pictures, Jessica. It was exactly like that." Silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. Finally, she spoke, her voice lower, more desperate. "I don't want a divorce." I closed my eyes. "That's not your choice anymore." Her breath hitched. "Daniel, please." I swallowed, keeping my voice even. "You made your decision. Now live with it." The divorce process started the way I expected it would, with Jessica trying to control the narrative. The moment she realized I wasn't going to break, she switched tactics. The texts and calls turned into long-winded emails, carefully worded to paint herself as the wrong party. She talked about how we had just grown apart, how mistakes were made on both sides, how she still loved our family and wanted to make things work. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Instead, I focused on the real fight, the legal one. I found a lawyer the next day, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who didn't waste time sugarcoating things. She listened to my story with a professional kind of sympathy, nodding as I laid everything out. The years of belittling, the affair, the proof I had gathered. When I was done, she folded her hands on her desk and gave me a simple, cold truth. "You have leverage," she said, "but don't think she won't fight back." I nodded. "I don't expect her to make this easy." And she didn't. Jessica hired her own lawyer within a week, a high-powered divorce attorney with a reputation for playing dirty. I wasn't surprised. That was her way: control, manipulation, twisting the truth to fit her version of reality. She wasn't just fighting for custody of the kids. She wanted everything. The house, alimony, a share of my savings, even though she made more money than me. "She's acting like you were the one who cheated," my lawyer said, shaking her head as she read through Jessica's initial demands. "She's always been good at rewriting history," I muttered. The first real battle happened in a meeting with both attorneys present. Jessica sat across from me, composed, her hair perfectly styled, her outfit meticulously chosen to make her look put together and professional. But I knew better. I saw the way she gripped her pen a little too tightly, the way her gaze flickered when I didn't look away first. She was nervous. Her lawyer started strong, pushing for full custody, claiming I wasn't fit to be the primary parent. "Daniel has been unemployed for years," he said smoothly. "Jessica has provided for the family while he stayed home, relying entirely on her income." I let out a short laugh, shaking my head. My lawyer leaned forward, sliding a folder across the table. "Daniel has been the primary caretaker of the children, while Jessica was busy with other things." She flipped open the folder, revealing the photos of Jessica at the hotel. The timestamps. The proof. Jessica's jaw clenched. The room went silent. Her lawyer shifted in his seat, clearing his throat. "Jessica's personal life has nothing to do with her ability to parent." I leaned back in my chair, meeting Jessica's gaze. "Maybe, but it has everything to do with her credibility." Jessica exhaled sharply, her fingers digging into the table. She knew she had lost control. The rest of the meeting was tense. Her demands softened, her tone less confident. The leverage was mine now, and she knew it. In the end, she agreed to joint custody, but I could tell it wasn't out of fairness. It was because she had no other choice. She had spent years making me feel small, treating me like I was less than her, but now she had to sit across from me and accept that she had lost. As we stood to leave, she hesitated, looking at me like she wanted to say something. But there was nothing left to say. I walked out of that room without looking back. Thank you for listening to the end. I hope you enjoyed it very much. Don't forget to give a like and tell us in the comments what you would do in such a situation.